This is GST211, History and Philosophy of Science. And our topic, chapter 4, is Man and His Energy Resources. It's divided into 6 sections: Man and History, Energy Resources, Renewable Resources, Non-Renewable Energy Resources, Conservation of Energy, and Energy Policies in Nigeria. Now, Man and History of Energy. By way of introduction, history of man is intrinsically knitted in the utilization of energy in many ways. The energy needs of man, therefore, dates back to his history. This unit discusses man and the history of energy usage. And you are expected, as part of your learning outcomes at the end of this course, to 1. Describe the evolution of man. Give the 2 models in the evolution of man. Describe the energy, the history. Describe the history of energy utilization by man. State when man discovered energy, and then state the oldest form of energy. The history of and evolution of man is based on 2 main models: the Out of Africa model and the multi-regional model. We are told that modern man, called Homo sapiens, or wise man in Latin, belonged or evolved from the extinct species called Mono erectus, which existed some 1.9 million years ago. Arguably, modern man originated from Africa. The Out of Africa model is premised on the highest genetic variation or species prevalent in Africa, much more than anywhere else in the world. The mitochondrial Eve, that is the matrilineal most recent common ancestor in whom the modern DNA and who probably lived some 500 to 500,000 years ago, was the source of all the data that was used to buttress the Out of Africa model. Now, man and the utilization of energy. Historically, it was believed that some 1.5 million year old spark brought about the utilization of energy by man, following which the burning of biomass about the revolution of energy by the early man. But prior to this first spark theory, the sun and geothermal energies were the very oldest sources of energy to man. We will conclude by saying as early as 8,000 years ago, man had discovered the usage of energy for transportation. We expect you just some form of self-assessment questions. State 2 models that describe the evolution of man, and then the Out of Africa model of man's evolution stems from skull measurements of 53 human populations from around the world. True or false? Just some exercise for you there. Now, the second topic we want to look at, is energy resources. We know that no society develops beyond its level of energy utilization. What it means is any society that is able to harness and utilize its energy potential, that society is likely to be up in the ladder of development than others. You are expected as a student to define, after this topic, what is energy, explain what resource is, state the meaning of energy resources, and then state 2 forms of energy. Ultimately, you should also define the 2 forms of energy. So, the meaning of resource, we have defined what energy is, or energy is anything that is needed to move objects from one location to the other. It is normally the totality of these geologic materials that are used as energy are called resources. Once you begin to measure and know the quantity involved, you are zooming into what we call reserves. So those are the 2 basic differences between a resource and a reserve. The reserve is measured, estimate, while resource is the totality of it. So therefore, energy resources, as we said, is the totality of geologic material that can be used for economic development, for transportation, other forms of socio-political life of man. Now, forms of energy. Energy can exist in different forms. Energy stored energy is potential energy, while when converted to move objects about, it is called kinetic energy. It can exist in both living things and in non-living things. That takes us to two major forms of energy: the renewable energy. This section introduces students to the knowledge of renewable energy with classical examples. Learning outcomes are expected to be: 1. The student should define what renewable energy resources, list examples of renewable energy resources, describe how each contributes to the energy needs of society, list the advantages of renewable energy resources, and state which renewable energy resource are utilized in Nigeria. We'll try to look at the advantages and disadvantages of these renewable energy resources. So we'll start with advantages. The advantages of renewable energy resources are: 1. They are available in abundant quantity and free to use. They do not expire. The sun, for example, can never be exhausted. They are considered green and environmentally friendly because of their low carbon emissions. That means that renewable energy does not pollute the environment as much as the non-renewable options. Because of their, number 4, because of their vast availability, utilizing them can stimulate the economy and create jobs. Just imagine Nigeria is delving or starts utilizing solar energy. The sun is almost everywhere. So you can imagine how much of the economy can be stimulated. Those to produce the collectors, those engineers to maintain them, to those to produce the service parts, and the rest. So it can actually stimulate the economy. And then number 5, you do not have to rely on any third-party country for supply. OPEC, for example, in the energy world, regulates the quantity of oil produced per day. For example, if you can fix a quota and say Nigeria can produce 2.8 million barrels per day. But the sun, for example, you can't regulate that. So third-party reliance is eliminated. Then number 6, renewable sources can cost less than consuming the local electrical supply. Now, the disadvantages of renewable energy resources. Number 1, setting up a plant can be quite costly. Example is in Nigeria here. Since the last time the Kainji Dam was built, it has not been able to build the next since then. 2, solar energy can be used during the daytime and not during the night or rainy season. That's a major disadvantage. And then number 3, geothermal energy can bring toxic chemicals beneath the earth's surface onto the top and create environmental changes. If we were to use geothermal energy, which is a good source in other parts of the world, but it has its disadvantage, it can come up with a lot of environmental hazards. Number 4, building hydroelectric dams across the river can be quite expensive and can affect natural flow and wildlife. Once a river is dammed, the natural habitat is distorted. Number 5, suitable sites for strong winds have to be chosen to use wind energy and can also affect bird population. So the most important renewable energy resources that are presently tapped and used are listed below: hydroelectric power, wind energy, solar energy, geothermal energy, and tidal energy. Let's look at in a little bit in detail of these examples. Hydroelectric power. This is energy harnessed from moving or falling water, which transforms this gravitational energy into electrical energy. So far, it is the widest and the largest of the renewable energy, constituting over 95% worldwide. And And Nigeria has been 90% dependent on hydroelectric energy, with Kainji, Jebba, Shiroro, Gurara, and Mambila dams as major or potential sources. And so number 2, wind. The energy from wind has been harnessed since time immemorial in form of windmills, but recently turbines connected to generators are used to produce electricity. Wind supplies 1% of world's energy needs. The only thing is that it is still most largely at the trial stage, and it has not acquired widespread applicability. Solar energy is the 4th example we look at. Solar energy is energy generated from the sun. This is about the most abundant energy resource, enough to provide the whole energy needs of the world within a short time. Harnessing it is a major challenge, thereby limiting its widespread usage. That is why it's not used widely. So far, in Nigeria, it has not appropriated such technology, but recently state governments in the northern part of the country have started experimenting with the idea in the face of the energy crisis in the country. States like Jigawa, Bauchi, and a host of others are in the forefront of the utilization of solar energy core. The 5th example we'll look at is tidal power of renewable energy sources. Variation in natural tidal waves is another potential source of energy in most developing economies. In some developed countries, it has already been used to generate hundreds of megawatts of electricity. The world's largest tidal station in France can, for instance, generate up to 320 megawatts. That is enough to supply electricity for states like Cross River in Nigeria. Now, number 6 is geothermal energy. Geothermal energy is energy generated from heat stored beneath the Earth's surface. This is one of the safest and cleanest, but the major disadvantage is its restricted occurrence. In Nigeria, for example, we don't have much of it, except in few locations, including the Nasarawa state here, in Akiri, in Awe local government, and in Kiana, where warm springs with temperatures reaching 50 degrees have been recorded. It occurs in certain zones of the Earth where there is high heat flow, or in volcanically active areas such as New Zealand and Iceland, largely around the circum-Pacific regions. Now, some statistics of world geothermal production as of 2007. United States has been able to harness 2,687 megawatts. Philippines 1,970. Indonesia is 992. Mexico 953. Italy 810. Japan 535. And so on. A total of 9,732 megawatts have been harnessed from geothermal sources all over the world, with prospects of development further. And then the last example we want to talk about is biomass or biofuels. This is fuel derived from biologic matter. It is different from fossilized fuel because it is from fresh material that can be grown repeatedly after being harvested. Biomass can be used to produce an energy-rich gas called biogas. It's worth noting that biodiesel energy started when, in 1893, a German Rudolf Diesel ran the first diesel-powered engine, and ever since it has developed in various dimensions. Having concluded on renewable, let's look at non-renewable energy resources for topic. And you are expected as learning outcomes to 1, define what is not non-renewable energy resource, give examples of non-renewable energy resources, describe local examples and their contribution to the energy needs of man, compare them with the renewable energy options, give the advantages to man, give the disadvantages to man, and then describe how they affect man's environment. Let's start with the advantages of non-renewable sources. They are cheap and easy to use. You can see everywhere you turn around there is petrol. A small amount of nuclear energy can produce large amount of power. Example is a nuclear. Remember, the world has not recovered yet from the nuclear bomb detonated during the World War II. That is how much energy can be produced from nuclear. So it's a major advantage. They have little or no competition at all. They are cheap when converting from one type to another. But their disadvantages include: one, they will expire someday. As they are exploited, they are depleting. The speed at which such resources are being utilized, that's number 2. They can have serious environmental changes. They release toxic gases in the air when burnt, which are the major cause for global warming. Since these sources are going to expire soon, prices are soaring day by day. Now, major examples of non-renewable energy resources include: 1, natural gas and petroleum. The natural gas and petroleum are formed from partially decayed remains of organic matter. Microscopic life forms like plankton, foraminifera, diatoms, and other organisms may be partially buried by the accumulation of mud and other sand debris, which separates them from oxidized seawater, leading to anoxic, oxygen-deprived environments. This anoxic condition favors the preservation of these organisms to eventually break down with increasing temperature and pressure, with deeper burial to form petroleum and natural gas. The first successful oil well was completed by Edwin Clark in 1859 in Pennsylvania. Nigeria is the largest oil producer in Africa and the 10th largest producer of crude oil in the world. First discoveries and actual production in the Nigerian Niger Delta was in 1958 in Oloibiri. The second example of non-renewable sources is coal. Coal, the most abundant fossil fuel in the earth crust, formed from compaction of plant matter that has not completely decayed. It is about the most abundant fossil fuel that became a substitute for wood since the 15th century. About 25% of the world's coal reserves are in the United States. Russia is second with 15 to 20%, while China and India share 20 to 25%. Anthracite is black coal, is the highest rank, while peat, which is also known as brown coal, is the lowest ranked coal. Another major example of non-renewable energy resource is uranium and other radioactive materials. It is the principal fuel for the world's nuclear power plants. The metal uranium commonly occur in the form of an ore called pitchblende or uraninite, and oxide, which is usually concentrated in hydrothermal veins, cracks filled with solid, hot, and mineralized fluids hosted by rocks. This ore powers nuclear reactors to produce energy ranging from electricity to the production of nuclear warheads. Having considered all these examples, we will look at the fifth topic, conservation of energy. We have looked at the advantages and disadvantages of all the energy options available. So, the conservation of energy is very important to its usage to man. This section deals with the need and ways to conserve energy. And as part of the learning outcomes, the students should be able to define conservation of energy, 2. State the need to conserve energy. 3. Give examples of ways to conserve energy. And then 4. Describe new and safer ways to conserve energy. The question is, why conserve energy? I've mentioned 3 reasons here. There is need to protect the environment. There is an urgent need actually to conserve, to protect the environment at the rate at which energy is being used. Secondly, there is also need to save the depleting resources for future generations. You agree with me that energy will soon expire. We've looked at it as a disadvantage. So there is need to conserve it to avoid for the future generation. Thirdly, there is need to avoid waste since the cost of energy keeps increasing each year. Now, how do we conserve energy? Energy conservation involves simple, habitual chores that are not difficult. It starts from your little home by 1. Turning off the light during the daytime when you are not using it. 2. Washing dishes and clothes with cold water, thereby saving energy used in heating the water. Number 3. Using public transport instead of your own vehicle in order to reduce consumption and costs. These simple points may appear simple, but they have far-reaching implications at the long run. Now, by expanding these energy-saving measures to a complete societal level, the impact can be quite enormous. Just imagine the population, the whole of you in this class, choose to board one vehicle or one train. Just imagine how safer our environment will be and how much energy consumption would have been saved. Now let's look at some case studies on the conservation of energy. Number 1 is the use of ethanol for transportation. Many countries are opting for more environmentally friendly and cheaper renewable energy sources in order to save the environment and help their economies. A few are highlighted to demonstrate the options taken by some countries. Please take note, when you hear green options, these days we are referring to renewable options. United States of America is the first case study. Nearly all gasoline sold in the US presently is mixed with 10% ethanol and is called E10, capital E10. Flexible fuel cars and trucks are designed to consume gasoline blends of up to 85%, that is E85, with only 15% of petrol. That is meant to cut the dependence on the non-renewable petrol by a substantial amount. In addition, the environment is safer. So what science is doing, or what energy advocates are doing, is to reduce the hydrocarbon content and replace with more friendly, less carbon content options, ethanol. So when you say, we hear E85, it means only 15% of hydrocarbon or petrol or diesel is in the blend. The second example is, or case study, is Brazil. In Brazil, there is presently a trial E95 bus. Brazil had an ethanol fuel program in 1970. By 2008, Brazil has 35,000 filling stations with at least 1 ethanol pump. Their raw material is sugarcane, the same sugarcane that we use here for mostly largely consumption. They are utilizing it there for production of ethanol to save the environment. So how about Nigeria? It will suffice to mention that Nigeria's cassava program of the late 1990s, by the Obasanjo regime was meant to vigorously pursue an ethanol for fuel project. However, this has not really materialized due largely to technological limitations and public policy truncation by subsequent regimes. By way of summary, countries are going for a policy called waste to wealth, rather than allow the waste to impact our environment. Policies are vigorously pursued to convert this waste to energy options, thereby making the environment safer. Now let's wrap up by looking at some national energy policies in Nigeria. You are expected here to just identify some national energy policies in Nigeria, state the renewable energy master plan, state the importance of the national energy policy. So why energy policy? The level of energy utilization in an economy, and then the efficiency of conservation of energy resource to useful energy, is directly indicative of the level of development of that economy. So what we're saying is, the better you come up with a good policy framework for energy utilization, the more developed the country is set to start. So we're asking why energy policy? One, to ensure optimal, adequate, reliable, and secure supply of energy and its efficient utilization in the country. It is essential to put in place a coordinated, coherent, and comprehensive energy policy. The policy will serve as a blueprint for the sustainable development, supply, and utilization of energy resources within the country, and for the use of such resources in international trade and cooperation. So some examples will just be mentioned as we wrap up this course. The National Renewable Energy and Energy Policy 2015. The Renewable Energy Policy approved by the federal government on 20th of April 2015 seeks to establish a policy framework for developing the abundant renewable energy sources in Nigeria, as well as efficiency in energy services and supply. Recall that Nigeria is largely dependent on the non-renewable option. So this energy policy, renewable energy policy in 2015, is proposed and enacted to ensure that Nigeria explore and shift from the non-renewable to the green energy option by harnessing all her renewable energy options. Then the second energy policy that we're mentioning here is the Nigerian Renewable Energy Master Plan 2011. Take note, there are various other energy policies, but the purpose of this course, we'll just look at these two. In order to promote the shift from non-renewable energy resource option, which Nigeria is largely dependent on, the Nigerian Renewable Energy Master Plan 2011, called REM, states that the national objective is to increase the share of renewable sources in electricity from 13% in 2015 to 23% by 2025 and 36% by 2030, which means the master plan is to cut down in that order, increase the renewable options order. It's a good thing that today Nigeria is a major player in the lithium world and other green options. We hope that this master plan is being vigorously pursued. Thank you for listening.